A cold wind swept across the open prairie as the sun dropped behind the distant hills, leaving streaks of orange fading into deep blue. The small settlement on the edge of the frontier quieted for the night. Horses were tied to posts, dust still clinging to their coats after a long day on rough trails. A few men sat outside the saloon, boots stretched out, smoke curling from rolled tobacco leaves. They spoke softly, tired from work and wary of trouble. Folks in that town did not trust easily. Outsiders were judged before they even spoke. That night, trouble did not come with guns or riders. It came with footsteps softer than the wind. She appeared from the tree line, wrapped in worn deer hide, hair braided with bits of broken beads. Her face held dust from long travel and tired eyes that spoke of hardship. Though she carried herself with strength, there was something different about her compared to other tribal women seen around the plains. She moved with hesitation, as if each step toward the town cost a piece of courage. People noticed her, whispering to one another, unsure whether she came seeking peace or bringing danger. The frontier was full of uneasy truths, and the line between friend and enemy changed with every season. She stopped near the well in the center of town. The dying light touched her face, revealing scars along her arms, marks that looked like they came not from battle, but from a life that offered no softness. A few women peeked from behind doors, clutching their children close. Ranch hands paused in their steps. The sheriff, leaning against the post, eyed her with caution. No one moved to greet her. She stood alone. A cowboy stepped out from the stable, brushing hay from his worn coat. He was a quiet soul, known in town only by the work he did and the miles he walked alone. His horse was his only companion most days, and he seldom stayed in one place long. He had seen the hardships of war between tribes and settlers, seen homes burned, seen fights no one cared to speak of. He did not wear medals or carry tailies. His life moved like the wind, never settling. When he noticed her standing still, breathing like someone gathering strength, he slowed his pace. He did not draw fear or anger, only curiosity. She lifted her eyes to him. There was no pride in her voice, only a tired ache. She spoke plain words, not with force, but with a kind of surrender. No one wants me. I need a husband. I just need one chance. The town froze. Every whisper stopped. The sheriff stood straighter. The women who watched from doorways stared with wide eyes. Even the wind seemed to still. Her voice carried across the empty street, and though it was soft, it felt heavy. She did not beg for food or shelter. She begged for acceptance, for a place in a world that had thrown her aside. The cowboy looked at her, unsure how to answer. She seemed young, yet her eyes held years beyond her age. He could see she had walked far. She looked like someone who lost everything and crossed the plains alone. She did not ask him to rescue her or hide her. She asked for something much heavier. Marriage on the frontier was not a matter of comfort. It meant shared labor, shared danger, shared sorrow. It meant binding fates in a land where death lingered between storms and arrows. A few men laughed under their breath, mocking her boldness. Others shook their heads. Settlers feared ties with tribal people, afraid of trouble from both sides. No rancher wanted to risk the anger of neighbors by taking in someone seen as unwanted. She must have known that, yet she still stood there. Her voice trembled, but she did not lower her gaze. She told the cowboy she had lived among her people once, but the world had changed. Rage took her kin. Hunger followed. Her tribe scattered, villages burned, promises broken. She survived storms and dry seasons. She helped care for children who no longer had fathers. She did everything she could, yet she came to believe she was cursed by misfortune. Those around her saw her as a reminder of loss, not a bearer of hope. She had no home left. She had no family willing to keep her. She wanted to start again, far from the ashes of old life. The cowboy listened. He did not speak quickly. His life was quiet, but he was not heartless. He knew loneliness. He had seen women worn down by life, carrying sorrow like heavy packs. Still, he hesitated. He was careful with his words, and he knew the world did not treat mixed paths kindly. People in town watched, waiting for his answer. Some wanted him to refuse. Others wanted a reason to drive her away. Only a few watched with concern, wondering what pain brought her here. She stepped closer. Her hands held out slightly, showing she carried no weapon. Her voice lowered. She did not offer beauty or riches. She offered loyalty, work, a willing heart. She could hunt, sow, break horses, track game, gather herbs for sickness. She said she would help him build a ranch, plant crops, tend animals, face storms at his side. She did not ask for love at first sight. She asked only not to be cast aside again. He stood silent, eyes searching hers. The night pressed closer. Lanterns flickered. People whispered about danger, shame, opportunity, or fate. The town held its breath. Before he could speak, a group of men came from the saloon, faces sour with suspicion. They did not hide their hostility. They told her to leave the settlement. They said she brought trouble. They called her unwanted, a burden. One man stepped forward, reaching for her arm as if to drag her away from the well. The cowboy stepped between them with quiet strength, pushing the man back without raising his fist. She looked at him, hope rising again. But hope could be a dangerous thing on the frontier. The others around them were ready for conflict. If he defended her, he risked becoming an outcast himself. If he walked away, she had no place left to go. The air felt thick, as if a choice made in that moment could change more lives than either realized. The cowboy finally spoke. His voice low enough that only she could hear him. Before I decide anything, I need to know the truth. Tell me what you are running from. Her breath shook. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but before she could answer, the sound of distant hooves echoed from the darkness beyond the ridge. The men turned. Horses were approaching, more than a few, their silhouettes barely visible under the rising moon. The sheriff's hand moved to his belt. Women hurried inside. The night shifted from tension to fear. Whoever came did not ride slow or peaceful. She stepped back, eyes wide, as if she knew exactly who those riders were, and the cowboy realized her past was reaching them faster than expected. The next moment would decide everything. The truth she held, the danger on the trail, and whether he would stand beside her or step away, but she did not speak yet. She stood frozen, torn between fear and hope, while the riders drew closer. The prairie night waited, holding its breath. The riders moved closer, the thunder of hooves cutting through the still night like a warning from the plains themselves. Dust rose behind them in a long tail, blurring their shapes into shadows. Lamps outside homes flickered as people hurried indoors. Doors slammed shut. Curtains dropped. Most folks in that town understood when to step back and let danger pass. The sheriff stood ready beside the post, eyes narrowed and jaw tight. But everyone could see he was outnumbered before anything even started. The cowboy kept his stance. Boots planted firmly between the woman and the gathering crowd. He did not reach for his gun. Instead, he studied her face. She watched the riders the way a person watches a storm that once destroyed their home. There was no shock in her eyes, only the heavy recognition of something long expected. She whispered under her breath, her voice carrying a sorrow deeper than fear. She said those riders were not strangers. They belonged to a wandering band that used to travel near her people, but had turned to raiding when winters grew harsh and food turned scarce. They did not follow old laws anymore. They followed hunger. The cowboy asked softly if she was followed. She did not answer with words, just lowered her gaze as if she blamed herself for the trouble coming to town. He understood enough. She had been running for days, wounded by the past, chased by men who saw her as a burden or a reminder of debts owed. The frontier could turn even the desperate into hunters. When the riders reached the edge of the settlement, they slowed to a trot. Their horses snorted, leather straps glistening under moonlight. They carried weapons, not raised, but visible enough to send a message. They scanned the town with cold eyes, looking for something or someone. The leader sat tall on his saddle, feathers tied into his hair and bones clinking against his chest piece. His expression held no welcome. He called out, demanding to know if anyone had seen a wandering woman. He described her with cruel bitterness, as if she was no more than property lost in the night. Silence fell over the empty street. The townsfolk hid behind walls, unwilling to involve themselves. They had learned long ago that siding with either settlers or tribes could bring ruin. Neutrality was their shield, even if it meant turning away from someone in need. The woman trembled, though she tried to keep her shoulders straight. The cowboy could see she felt trapped, caught between men she fled from and strangers who did not want her. He knew the sheriff watched too, weighing whether to step forward or stay silent to protect the town from bloodshed. Every decision on the prairie carried a cost. The leader demanded again, this time sharper. The sheriff stepped out into the open with a slow, steady stride. He told the riders that the town belonged to neither side and would not hand anyone over without cause. The leader laughed at the idea of law dividing the land. He said the woman had debts. He accused her of betraying her own people, of turning her back on tradition and home. He spoke like she was a traitor rather than a survivor. The cowboy glanced at her, waiting for her to deny it, but she remained silent. The riders did not attack. They simply waited, letting fear work for them. After a long pause, the leader promised to return before dawn. He warned that if the town sheltered her, everyone there would share her fate. With that, he turned his horse and rode back into the darkness. The others followed, leaving dust in their wake and tension hanging heavy over the silent settlement. When they were gone, the sheriff approached the cowboy. He asked if she was worth risking lives. The cowboy did not answer right away. He knew that choosing to stand with her meant crossing lines drawn by fear, politics, and survival. He also knew she had nowhere else to go. The sheriff finally turned and walked back toward the station, telling the cowboy not to make choices that would force the whole town into trouble. If morning brought conflict, everyone would suffer. The woman sat on the cold ground beside the well, head in her hands. The cowboy knelt beside her and asked what truth she had been afraid to speak. She looked him square in the eyes, though tears clung to her lashes. She explained she once belonged to a respected family. Her father led their small band, keeping peace with settlers and trading for supplies. She helped children learn the old tongue, helped elders in winter, and walked long trails to gather healing roots. She had a place and purpose, but when raids broke out between rival groups, her band was accused of helping settlers. Families turned on one another. Fires burned. People she trusted vanished. She tried to defend her father's choices, believing peace was worth fighting for. But peace became a stain no one wanted. When hunger spread, she was blamed for advising kindness. They called her weak, cursed, the cause of misfortune. After her father fell to illness, those who once protected her now demanded she leave. She walked away without even a good blanket, carrying only what she remembered. The cowboy listened without judgment. He understood that a person could lose everything not through fault, but through timing and fear. She said she sought a husband because she needed belonging, not because she wanted to escape work or responsibility. A married woman could not be forced back by her old band. She could start a life helping someone build a ranch, turning land into something new. She dreamed of a home where no one carried shame for choosing peace. The cowboy took a slow breath, studying her calloused hands and tired eyes. She had strength, but also wounds that ran deep. He asked if she expected him to risk bloodshed for her tonight. She shook her head. She told him she would leave before dawn to draw danger away from the settlement. She said she would keep moving alone, even if it meant dying out in the cold grass. She would not be the burden they accused her of being. He told her running would not solve anything. If she left, those riders might return seeking revenge anyway. Fear lingered long after its target disappeared. She stared at him, unsure what answer to hold on to. She asked if he believed she deserved a chance. He looked away, knowing belief was not enough. The frontier demanded action, not words. He led her to the stable where she could rest in the hay. It was not a home, but it was shelter for the night. She lay on old blankets, her body shaking from exhaustion rather than fear. The cowboy sat outside the stable door, holding his saddle as a shield and resting his back against the wall. He stayed awake, listening to the wind move through the tall grass. He wondered why fate placed her in his path, and why her voice echoed in his mind like a song too heavy to forget. The settlement slept uneasy. Lanterns burned longer than usual. Even the sheriff kept watch from the porch, eyes fixed on the horizon. Dawn would come soon, and with it choices. The prairie did not care who lived, loved, or died. It carried secrets like wind carries dust, scattering them across endless plains. But some secrets found roots, forcing men and women to face truths they tried to outrun died as darkness thinned and the first pale line of morning stretched along the hills. The cowboy heard hooves again, softer this time, as if someone approached alone. He rose quietly, hand pressing against his coat, heart steady yet uncertain. He looked toward the ridge, waiting to see whether morning brought peace, betrayal, or a path he never planned to walk. The woman inside the stable sat up, eyes open. Listening to the same sound, neither spoke. The day was just beginning, and trouble moved with it. The first light of dawn slid across the prairie like a slow-moving tide, brushing gold over the grass and the roofs of the quiet settlement. The hooves the cowboy heard belonged not to the returning riders, but to a lone drifter making his way toward town. His horse was lean, ribs showing through a dusty coat, and the man atop it looked just as worn. He carried a bundle tied behind his saddle and a rifle slung over one shoulder, though his eyes held more exhaustion than threat. The sheriff stepped forward to greet him, hand near his belt, but not drawn. The stranger lifted one hand, signaling he meant no trouble. He said he came from a town farther west that had been raided days ago. He was searching for survivors, hoping someone from the settlement might have seen any of his kin passing through. His voice cracked when he spoke of what he found there. Smoke, ashes, missing families. Tracks leading east. He believed a small group of raiders had driven captives into the plains. He hoped to catch their trail before the snow fell. The cowboy listened, knowing the world was smaller than it looked. Trouble wandered freely across borders, carrying pain from one town to the next. The stranger described the raiders. Their leader wore bones and feathers. They rode with speed and hunted like wolves. The cowboy stiffened. The sheriff glanced at him, immediately understanding that these raiders were the same ones who appeared last night, and the same ones hunting the woman sleeping in the stable. But neither man said anything aloud. The stranger did not know who he was talking about, and for now, silence kept the fragile calm intact. The sheriff offered him water and a place to rest. The stranger refused, eager to move on. Before leaving, he warned that raiders were desperate. They needed food, shelter, even captives to trade. They would strike again soon. When he rode off into the dawn, the sheriff turned to the cowboy and muttered that the town had little time to prepare. If conflict arrived, the woman in the stable might become the spark that lit the whole prairie. The cowboy walked back to the stable and found her awake, staring at the open door as if unsure whether to step out or vanish into the grass. He handed her a small tin cup of water. She thanked him quietly and sipped with shaking hands. She told him she did not want anyone else harmed because of her past. He told her the raiders were hurting others long before she fled. He said danger was not born from her arrival, only noticed because of it. She did not argue, but she lowered her gaze again. Outside, the townsfolk gossiped. They whispered about whether she was cursed, whether she carried trouble, whether the cowboy was doing something foolish by protecting her. Some thought she might bring new trade or fresh knowledge. Others feared she would bring arrows and gunfire. Tension in the town simmered like a kettle on hot coals. Meanwhile, a different concern brewed. A ranch owner on the outskirts, older and bitter, saw the woman not as danger, but as an opportunity. He approached the sheriff, offering to take her in as a worker. He made it sound noble, as if he was doing charity. But those who knew him understood his generosity came with chains. He often hired the desperate and treated them worse than cattle. If she refused or tried to leave, he would claim she owed him debts. She would become trapped again, only under a new master. The sheriff hesitated, unsure whether to deny a lawful offer. The rancher spoke loudly about keeping peace with the raiders by handing her over or putting her to work where she could be controlled. The cowboy overheard and stepped in before the man finished. He told him she was not livestock to trade. The rancher sneered, claiming the cowboy cared too much for someone he barely knew. He warned that men who risked everything for strangers often died alone. That night the air turned cold. The woman sat by a small fire outside the stable, wrapped in a borrowed coat. She watched sparks drift into the dark sky and told the cowboy stories from her childhood. She spoke of learning to track deer with her father, how he taught her to read the wind and listen to the land. She told him how peaceful seasons once existed, where trading with settlers brought new tools and blankets, and how she believed both worlds could live side by side. But even then, she noticed people were quick to take what they needed and slower to give back. The cowboy shared little of himself, but he did mention he once planned to build a ranch with someone he cared about. It never happened. Life took them apart, and he drifted from trails to towns, unsure where he belonged. He worked hard, lived quietly, and kept his heart tucked away from promises. He did not say whether it was by choice or fear. She listened with gentle patience, sensing he carried more than he said. She told him he was not as alone as he believed. He felt her words more deeply than he expected. Yet the fire between them did not burn romantic. It burned like two souls warming their hands near the same flame. Unsure whether to reach out or step away before it grew, hours passed. The town slept. The wind carried distant sounds again, faint hooves and muffled voices. The cowboy rose, instincts sharp. He stood near the edge of town, staring across the moonlit grass. Shadows moved near the ridge. Not a raid, not yet, but a scouting group watching from afar. They did not approach, only observed. The woman saw them too and clutched her chest, her breath shallow. She whispered that the riders did not just want her. They wanted something she carried, something she refused to leave behind even when she fled. The cowboy asked what it was. She hesitated, then slowly pulled a small pouch from beneath her coat. It was stitched from rough hide, tied shut with faded sinew. She held it like it carried more weight than its size suggested. She said the pouch contained something sacred to her people. It was given to her by her father before he died. It carried old teachings and symbols meant to guide leadership. Whoever possessed it could claim authority among the scattered survivors of her band. Her enemies believed the pouch should belong to them, not to someone who defended peace. The cowboy understood now why the riders hunted her across miles. This was not about punishment. It was about power. She said she could not surrender the pouch. Even if she wanted to save the town by giving herself up, handing it over would allow them to rule through violence. She would rather die alone than let that happen. The cowboy respected her resolve, but it placed the settlement in greater danger than he imagined. Morning came again, bright and sharp. The townsfolk awoke uneasy. Children stayed indoors. Men polished rifles. The rancher spread whispers that the cowboy and the woman would bring disaster. Some believed him. Others watched silently, waiting to see whether courage or fear would decide their fate. The woman packed her things, preparing to leave before anyone forced her out. The cowboy grabbed her arm, not harshly, but firmly enough to stop her step. He said leaving would not end the chase. The riders would follow her, and the town would still suffer if they failed to catch her. He told her running alone never built anything new. She looked at him with a mix of gratitude and pain, unsure whether she deserved his help or whether she would ruin his life by staying. He told her he had made no promises yet. But he also told her that no one deserved to face a war with only the wind at their side. The riders were still out there, waiting for nightfall. The sheriff prepared defenses. The rancher gathered men who wanted her gone, and the cowboy stood between worlds. Unsure which path would cost more, the prairies stretched wide, quiet and endless, holding secrets close to the ground. The next move would decide not only her fate, but the fate of everyone caught between courage and fear. Night settled heavy over the plains, darker than any night before. Clouds crawled across the sky, covering the moon, leaving only faint outlines of the hills. The settlement held no laughter, no sound beyond the low creak of wooden signs swaying in the wind. People barred their doors and windows, whispering prayers, pretending sleep would keep danger away. But no one really slept. Everyone waited. The woman sat just outside the stable, hands wrapped tight around the worn pouch her father left her. She stared toward the ridge where shapes moved like restless shadows. The riders had returned, not openly as before, but silently, watching from a distance. Their fires burned faint and far, sparks rising and vanishing. They were waiting for the right moment. She shivered, not from cold, but from memories. She told the cowboy that once those men had been guided by elders who valued the land and respected treaties. But over time they lost leaders, lost food, lost hope. She said that when people lose hope, they stop listening to wisdom and start following whoever offers strength, even if it leads to ruin. The cowboy stood a few feet away, arms crossed, watching the horizon. He felt the pressure of responsibility he never asked for. He wondered what right he had to decide anything that involved lives beyond his own. Yet he stayed. He stayed because she looked at him not as a savior, but as someone who might understand. The sheriff approached quietly, asking if the riders were gathering to attack or simply threaten again. The cowboy said they would not wait much longer. The sheriff sighed, said the town had few men and fewer rifles, and most did not know how to fight. He warned that protecting her could cost innocent blood. The woman heard every word. Her gaze dropped to the dirt, but she did not break. She whispered that if she left now, she might draw them away before anyone got hurt. The cowboy shook his head. He reminded her that the riders did not just want her. They wanted what she carried, and they would tear apart every settlement searching for it, no matter where she ran. The sheriff rubbed his forehead, tired and torn, then left them to choose a path he could not force. Later that night, small groups of townsfolk gathered near the well. Some argued they should force her out before dawn. Others said helping her was the right thing to do, even if danger followed. The rancher spoke loudest, claiming the cowboy was blinded by pity, endangering everyone. He stirred the crowd until voices rose like clashing steel. A woman stepped forward, holding her child close, saying they had seen enough suffering on the frontier, and turning a wounded soul away would make them no better than raiders. Arguments swelled. The woman listened from afar, clutching her pouch, knowing she had become a question no one wanted to answer. As tempers flared, the cowboy stepped between both sides. He said blaming her would not stop the storm. He asked what they stood for if fear dictated every decision. He did not speak like a hero. He spoke like someone tired of watching life crumble because no one dared to take a stand. The crowd fell silent, not convinced but shaken. The rancher spat on the ground, warning that if the riders attacked, he would not protect those who sided with her. The cowboy walked back to the stable. The woman followed him quietly. She asked why he defended her when he owed her nothing. He stared at the dirt, admitting he lived most of his life walking away from things. He said he built fences instead of dreams because fences demanded less courage. She told him no one is born brave. People become brave when someone gives them a reason to be. He met her eyes, and something unspoken sparked between them. Not romance yet, but connection strong enough to change the wind. Before dawn, thunder rolled across the plains. Not from the sky, from horses. Dozens of riders emerged from the ridge, moving in a wide formation. Torches burned in their hands, flames beating against the wind. Their leader rode in front, eyes fixed on the town. The woman gasped, recognizing symbols painted on the horses, marks that belonged to more than one band. The raiders had gathered others, strengthening numbers with desperate allies. This was not a simple hunt. It was a march toward control. The town woke in panic. Men rushed to gather guns. Women pulled children into cellars. The sheriff rang the iron bell, calling everyone behind barricades. The cowboy mounted his horse, ready to ride out and meet the riders before they reached town. The woman grabbed his arm, begging him not to go alone. She said they would kill him before he could speak. He said if no one spoke, war would begin without a word. He rode out anyway, stopping halfway between the ridge and the settlement. His horse pawed the dirt, uneasy. The riders slowed, torches flickering. The leader recognized him, smirking. He asked if the cowboy planned to die for someone who was not his blood. The cowboy said blood did not decide what was right. The leader laughed, claiming right and wrong were meaningless when hunger ruled. He demanded the woman and the pouch. If she returned willingly, he promised no harm would fall on the settlement. The cowboy asked what he intended to do with power the pouch granted. The leader answered plainly, He wanted to unite scattered survivors and build a new rule based on force, not peace. He wanted to rise as a leader feared by both tribes and settlers. He believed fear worked faster than trust. His words carried conviction twisted by suffering. The cowboy shook his head, saying leadership built on fear collapses the moment someone stronger arrives. The leader's eyes hardened. He ordered his men to prepare. Spears lowered, rifles lifted. The cowboy held up his hand, begging one last time for reason. The leader promised that reason died when winter took their children. The woman watched from behind a fence, trembling. She knew the cowboy could not stall much longer. She stepped forward, ready to walk out and surrender herself, believing it might stop the bloodshed. The cowboy saw her movement and shouted for her to stay back. The leader saw too, ordering his men to seize her if she stepped any closer. The townsfolk watched, torn between fear and conscience. Some lifted rifles, hands shaking. Others begged their neighbors not to shoot. The rancher loaded his weapon, aiming toward the woman, believing sacrifice could save them. The sheriff shouted at him to lower it. The rancher refused, believing he was saving the town. The cowboy pointed his horse between the weapon and the woman. Blocking the shot, the tension pulled tight, stretched thin like rawhide on a drum. Wind picked up. Torches snapped. Horses snorted and stamped. Everyone waited for a spark. Then a distant howl echoed across the plains, long and haunting. Wolves, or perhaps just the voice of the land itself. It made even the riders pause. In that pause, the cowboy turned his horse back toward the woman, determination burning in his eyes. He whispered that he would not let her stand alone anymore. She looked at him with disbelief, turning slowly into hope, but hope was fragile. The leader raised his arm, signaling the beginning of violence. The woman stepped forward, clutching the pouch to her chest. She faced the riders directly, voice steady yet breaking. She said if anyone deserved leadership, they should fight for it with honor, not terror. She dared the leader to face her without hiding behind his men. Gasps echoed across the settlement. The leader froze, fury simmering beneath the surface. He rode forward alone, stopping just a few feet away from her. The air felt like glass ready to shatter. The cowboy stayed close, hands ready, heart racing. The leader leaned down, voice cold. He asked if she was ready to die for her beliefs. She said she was ready to live for them. He pulled his spear. She tightened her grip on the pouch. The cowboy reached toward his weapon, eyes locked on both of them. The prairie held still. The world balanced on a single heartbeat. Waiting for the moment everything would break, the leader's spear hovered in the air. Its shadow stretched across the dirt like a warning. The woman stood steady, clutching the pouch close to her chest. The cowboy kept one hand near his belt, ready to draw faster than fear could travel. The settlement held its breath. Even the riders behind the leader shifted uneasily, waiting to see whether they were following a man or marching off a cliff. The woman took a single step forward. Her voice was not loud, but every word carried. She reminded the leader he once protected children. She reminded him of nights when they sat under stars, listening to elders speak about guiding the land with wisdom, not conquering it with fear. She told him he changed when hunger came, when loss twisted hope into anger. She said she understood pain, but she refused to let pain turn into a throne. He lowered the spear slowly, though his hand still trembled with rage. For the first time, he looked past his own ambition. He saw the faces of his riders, men and women he dragged into chaos. Some looked uncertain. Some looked tired. One young rider lowered his bow, eyes full of doubt. The leader noticed. His posture faltered. The cowboy stepped forward beside the woman, not blocking her, but standing with her as if their voices formed a single truth. He told the riders the settlement did not want war. He told them no one here wanted to take anything from them. He said all they wanted was a life where children grew up with food and warmth, not fear. He spoke like a man who had seen too many graves dug for reasons forgotten. The riders murmured among themselves. The leader clenched his jaw, torn between pride and the weight of those watching him. The woman looked up at the dark sky and said the land itself was tired of blood. She asked them to lay down weapons, not forever, but long enough to speak. She offered to return to their camp and share what she carried with their elders, So long as no one forced power with violence, the leader stared at her. His grip loosened. He let the spear fall to his side. He agreed to one chance, but he warned that if she lied, he would return and no one would stop him. The woman nodded, accepting accountability instead of running from it. With a sharp tug on his reins, he turned his horse. The riders followed, torches moving across the plains like a long trail of fading fire. They left the settlement without spilling blood. The cowboy let out a breath he did not realize he held. The townsfolk stepped from their homes, stunned that dawn rose without smoke or screams. Some sighed in relief. Others looked ashamed for wishing her gone. The sheriff walked to the cowboy and nodded once, as if to say courage did more than guns that night. The rancher stood apart, arms crossed tight, frustration heavy on his face. But even he could not deny the truth staring back at him. War came close, yet the settlement still stood. He walked away quietly, leaving his arguments scattered like dust. The woman sank to her knees, hands covering her face. Not from fear, but from relief overwhelming her body. The cowboy knelt beside her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. She thanked him, voice trembling, saying he stood with her when she was alone. He told her she stood for herself first. He only walked beside her. Over the next few days, life settled back into rhythm. The town repaired fences, shared food with passing travelers, and watched the horizon with wary hope. The stranger who came earlier returned with news that some captives from his town were found alive. He thanked the settlement for refusing to fuel more violence. He rode off to reunite with whoever survived. The woman prepared for her journey to the riders' camp, knowing she had to face the elders and offer a path forward. The cowboy helped her pack supplies and gave her a better saddle than the worn blanket she once rode with. She told him she did not know whether she would stay with her people or return. She needed to see if peace could be rebuilt. He respected her purpose, even though a quiet ache filled his chest at the thought of her leaving. On the morning she rode out, the town gathered to watch. Some wished her well. Children waved. The sheriff handed her a small map, telling her which trails held water and which valleys carried storms. She nodded with gratitude. The cowboy walked beside her horse, stopping at the edge of the settlement. She looked at him, eyes softer than the first day she arrived. She thanked him not just for saving her, but for treating her like a person rather than a burden. She said he helped her remember she had worth beyond what others claimed. He looked down, unsure how to respond, then told her the prairie brought people together for reasons no one understands until later. He said she would always have a place to return to if she chose. She lifted the pouch to her heart, and promised she would return once she had done what needed to be done. She did not promise when. Some journeys could not be measured in days. She rode off at a slow pace, her silhouette growing smaller against the bright sky. The cowboy watched until she vanished over the hill, then headed back to the stable, feeling both proud and lonely. Weeks passed. Seasons shifted. The settlement rebuilt, growing stronger with each sunrise. The ranchers softened, offering fairer wages after seeing how fear nearly ruined them. The sheriff organized new trade routes, bringing food from distant farms. People began to trust again. One quiet morning, while the cowboy repaired a fence rail near the corral, distant hoofbeats echoed across the plains. He looked up, expecting a merchant or a drifter. Instead, he saw her riding toward the town, posture steady, eyes shining with calm purpose. She wore new leather, still simple but bearing symbols stitched by hands that welcomed her back. Behind her rode a small group, not raiders but representatives from her band. They carried no weapons drawn, only packs filled with goods to trade. She dismounted and walked to him. He stared at her, surprised, yet relieved. She told him the elders listened. Change would be slow, trust would take years, but the path of fear was no longer leading them. She chose to return to the settlement because she wanted to grow roots, not run windswept forever. He asked if she still needed a husband or if she found her future elsewhere. She smiled softly, saying she never needed ownership or rescuing. She needed partnership, a chance to belong where her heart felt safe. She asked if he still walked life alone or if he wanted to build something real, something shared, something that felt like home. He looked at her with clarity he did not have the day she arrived, ragged and silent. He told her he was tired of drifting. He wanted land, work, a future, and someone willing to build that life beside him. He said he could not promise perfection, only effort and loyalty. She said effort and loyalty were more precious than any vow spoken with empty hands. They walked into town together, side by side, not as strangers tied by fear, but as two souls choosing a future. The settlement welcomed them with cautious joy. The sun warmed the earth. Horses grazed near the well. The prairie wind carried no threat, only promise. In a world carved by hardship, they found a life shaped by hope. And for the first time since she crossed the plains, with dust on her boots and sorrow in her eyes, she felt wanted, not because she begged for a place, but because she earned one. Their story began with desperation, but it continued with purpose. A poor woman who once believed no one wanted her found someone who did not just want her, but chose her. And the cowboy who believed he walked alone finally stopped wandering.